Mine, you found someone new, but I can't change my love the way that you do.
This is the story of a lost neighborhood and of its people who did not want to go.
I don't want no money. I want my home. The old man is old. See how the old man is old? And I'm old. That's enough. I don't want to get out. I said to my two daughters, they don't want to get out too because they spend a lot of money. Plenty of money they spend in this place. We're not getting out to nobody. Never.
Hi, welcome to the West End Video Newsletter. Tonight's show is going to be about the B.R.A. I wanted to have Shirley Kressel on the show tonight, but Shirley's away, so we're going to go back to a show we did about a year and a half, and we cover a lot of the same ground. There's a few updates. One of them is that the B.R.A. sent a brief to New London, and there's a case pending before the same Supreme Court about eminent domain and urban renewal, and the B.R.A. Is supporting the taking of land down in Connecticut. And it's funny because the B.R.A. keeps saying that things like the West End could never happen again, and yet they send a brief down to Connecticut which probably will ensure things like the West End happening again. There was also a thing in the paper about Mayor Menino taking property from some black developer and giving it to the Rappaports. You know, Jerome Rappaport made millions from in 1954 from the old West End, you know, taken by eminent domain, and it's happening again. I wrote a letter into the Herald, and I'll read it for you. I guess some things never change. The city of Boston giving the Rappaports land taken from a private owner. What a surprise. The Rappaports made their money by the city of Boston giving them a whole neighborhood, the old West End. It was then John Hines, now it's Tom Menino. Mayors who like to give away other people's property. Too bad the Rappaports never give back to the neighborhoods any of the millions they make under eminent domain. Jerome Rappaport saved the Fleet Center from being renamed the Derek Jeter Center for one day. Too bad he didn't show the same altruism when he changed the name of the West End to Charles River Park. Jim Campano, Somerville. Yeah, I find that sort of offensive. And there's also, I think Shirley and I touched on this before, Kensington Place, where the city is taking the old Gaiety Theater, which in itself shouldn't be taken. But they're taking that, they took it from the city, and the city was supposed to use it as for a school for Chinatown. But the B.R.A. took the property from the city, and is also taking in is going to give the developer the glass slipper next door, plus all the streets around it. So, to a private developer, which, I don't know, it just seems totally absurd. But it'll go on. The destruction of the Gaiety is either happening now or scheduled in the future. This is March 2nd, so that's going to probably happen any time. I belong to a group called the Institute for Justice, and they're fighting like hell all over the country to stop things like this. But you should be aware that your house is a potential urban renewal project because they have passed a law, it's come down now, that if your house, if they can get more taxes for something where your house is, it's no longer that you take the property for public uses like a school or whatever, it's now down to public benefit. And if your house, if they can put a Walmart where your house is and get more taxes out of it, they can take your house and give you whatever the property values are, and it's usually less than what you would have got on the open market. So, anyways, I'd just like to say that the B.R.A. is getting real strong again, and they're getting crazy in Boston again, and you probably will see more West Ends around this area. Okay, let's go to the tape. Roll the tape, Joe. How'd you get involved with all this, Shirley?
Well, I'm a professional designer, a landscape architect and urban designer, and I moved to Boston 10 years ago, and I actually was just looking around what's doing here and seeing where I wanted to work next. And it turned out that I found out too much.
Yeah.
And I have a master's in landscape architecture, and I worked for about 12 years with Hannah Olin in Philadelphia. It's a very big landscape architecture and planning firm. And here I worked for a while with Brown and Rowe, and a little bit with Carol Johnson's office.
So you have all the credentials, and you've been very active. Like I say, I know you've been very active in the city, and you've done whatever. Let me ask you one pertinent question. What do you think about the B.R.A.?
How long do you have? Well, you know, people don't understand the Boston Redevelopment Authority. I mean, people in Boston, to a remarkable degree, don't understand what the B.R.A. does and the powers that it has. And the B.R.A., of course, likes it that way. I mean, it depends on ignorance of what it's doing to carry out its mission. And whereas in other cities, the redevelopment authorities, which are a leftover from the federal urban renewal program, you know, that,
big dollars,
that the feds bailed out of in the 70s, I mean, left in the 70s, is everywhere else, the redevelopment authority is a discrete entity. It's an authority. It's not part of the city government, and it does a circumscribed project or set of projects, and it is treated like a developer. It goes to the planning commission and to the city council and gets, you know, permitted like any other developer. It's a development developer. It's recognized as a developer. In Boston, only in Boston, in all of America, the B.R.A. was created in 1957. In 1960, a unobtrusive piece of section was slipped into a piece of legislation, the prudential legislation actually, that gave them a 121A. And Section 12, just in the middle of everything, says, the Planning Commission of Boston is hereby abolished, and all of its powers and properties will be taken by the Boston Redevelopment Authority. Then it goes on to Section 13. And it has changed Boston forever. It has changed Boston dramatically because Boston's planning is not done by a city agency. It's not accountable to the city council, and it's only accountable to the mayor because he appoints 4 of the 5 board members and the director. So it's not a functional relationship, but it's a political one. I mean, the control.
No,
it's an independent authority.
It's an independent authority, and it has. And lately, they've put some of the other things under it, like the financial section of the city. I forget what they call that.
The EDIC,
right?
Economic Development Industrial Corporation, and they also are the staff to the Boston Zoning Commission. They make recommendations to the Board of Appeal for variances, and they have the right to give out 121A contracts, which give complete zoning exemption and gigantic tax breaks. And this is aside from managing their vast empire of land holdings that are in the 24 urban renewal areas of Boston.
That's right. A lot of people don't realize how much property they do have.
425 parcels, a total of 250 acres, because I just looked in the assessor's records. I added them up. And do you know how much value the land is given by the assessor? And those are always very low because the B.R.A. is tax exempt. All that land doesn't pay taxes to the city of Boston.
It's a nonprofit.
Crime, well, it's a government agency.
Right.
It's a quasi-public. It's public when they want it to be.
Exactly.
For accountability purposes, they're quasi-private.
The city council can. The only thing the city council has to do with them is that if they decide to change the
urban renewal plan,
they have to go back to the city council.
Not for everything.
Okay.
Only for major modifications.
Okay.
And the B.R.A. has decided that they get to decide what's a major modification. So far, in the 40 years of urban renewal plans, they have made, well, when I looked it up, it was a year or two ago, it was 280. It must be about 300 modifications now. 300, many of which have multiple parts. So we can have well over 1,000 modifications now to these urban renewal plans. And do you know how many the B.R.A. deemed to be major? By my count, 6.
Oh, okay, I was close.
But the B.R.A. has recently said to the city council under 10. So
Okay.
between 6 and 10.
It's like you say, it was the Boston Housing Authority, and then they...
That was the Urban Renewal Agency first, and then
Right.
they created,
Then they created
the Boston
B.R.A.
Redevelopment Authority. And that was
it's-
57.
And it's funny because, you know, Jerome Rappaport, he was a city solicitor in Boston before he left, and he went to New York, and he teamed up with one of, what's his name, the park builder, Robert Moses. There was this guy Bonin, Jean-Pierre Bonin, who was a developer and a contractor under Moses. And then they did, no, what were those towers? University Towers in New Haven. And Ed Logue was the New Haven Redevelopment Authority. 4 years later, he was here in Boston as head of the B.R.A. So, you know, a lot of this is incestuous.
That's right. They were
and
circulating. He was so successful destroying New Haven that they felt they had to have him here.
That's right.
Well, their criterion was how much federal money he managed to snag.
That's
but
right.
nobody was looking to see was it doing any good.
Yeah,
so they
nobody
destroyed the city. And
Mm-hmm.
then to lure him here is why they actually took over the planning agency.
Okay.
He wouldn't take the job, as I have
right.
heard it, unless he could have the planning commission rolled into his agency, because he didn't want planning and zoning to get in
right.
the way.
Sure.
And it hasn't. City Council has been essentially deprived of its main job in Boston for 43 years.
I agree. There was, back in 1957, they're asking him why they didn't put the parcels out for bid, because they gave it to Jerome Rappaport and this guy Bonin. You know, they just handed it to him. And they said, well, because we found somebody that had the money and the wherewithal to do this. They said, well, isn't there anybody in Boston that has the money or the wherewithal to do all this? They said, yes. They said, well, how come you didn't put it out to auction? Because we found somebody, and they just kept, if you read this.
It's the same today. It's the same today. They put Hayward parcel out to bid.
Right.
And Hayward parcel, by the way, was a city-owned parcel,
Right.
owned by the taxpayers
Right.
of Boston.
Right.
And Mayor Menino wrote a letter, just like he did with City Hall Plaza, wrote a letter to the B.R.A. saying, if this is blighted, take it by
That's
eminent domain and do something with it.
And
they took it by eminent domain from the city, and he waived compensation like he did on City Hall Plaza. So the city has gotten nothing from both of those, not a cent.
See, I guess a lot of people don't understand about eminent domain. Up until about 1953 or 54, you could only use eminent domain for public use.
purpose. For public use. Right.
For public use, okay?
Right.
Around 54, 53, they came up with a new definition. They called it public purpose.
Right.
Now it's no longer public purpose. It's public benefit. If you have and public benefit can be if you have a place to tie your shoes, I guess.
Well, you know, they defined, urban renewal really has been such a disaster for this country. It defined, to do urban renewal, they redefined public purpose or benefit or whatever they were kept trying to call it, as eliminating slums, which is low-income housing,
Right.
as we now know, and eliminating blight, which is even broader. It could mean slums. It could mean just someplace where the market hasn't seen fit to invest.
That's right.
You know, just economic development has been defined as public purpose. Well, that could be anything.
That's right.
Everything is economic development. So now, taking by eminent domain is just by fiat. The developer goes in. This is what's happening in Kensington, in Chinatown, right across the street from the Hayward parcel. It's quite a hotbed of shenanigans there in that area, because the property values now are soaring because of that $7 million Ritz condos and so on.
Exactly.
That'll do it for you.
Usually does.
So Kensington owns a piece of, you know, one building or a couple of buildings, and it has put in a proposal. They own 20,000 square feet. That's under a half an acre. They've put in a proposal that actually, in the proposal, assumes that they own two other properties that have to be, it turns out, taken by eminent domain.
What's that? The strip?
One is the glass slipper,
Glass
and
slipper,
the
right.
other is part of a parcel that they own the top of, but not the bottom of. It's a part of the Christian Union that's not in the that's in the PDA 4, PDA eligible area. It's suddenly included.
Right.
So clearly they just sat down over lunch and made a deal and said, you know, you let us write you in here, and we'll be sure that you never have to do anything PDA-ish in return. And it's written in the PDA application, because I have a copy. There's a whole section that basically says the Christian Union we claim it as part of the PDA, but nothing that they ever do has to be bound by this PDA plan, the Planned Development Area Plan. If they want to do a plan, they can make their own plan and don't worry about it. There's a market reason for it. We make the market do those things, and then we say, horrors, how are we going to cure this?
So what happened in that area was they couldn't get really anybody. The Herald Traveler, which is an old Yankee paper at that time, was the only ones that would go in there and build. So they went around looking for a slum in a good location, and they came upon the West End, on the river, the foot of Beacon Hill. Wow, right? And we went. They just wiped us right out.
Slum,
right.
a working class community.
And
in the right place.
And Herb Gans, when he was there for a year before, he says, when I came in there, I was all for this plan. We're going to change it, change the world, and this is going to be it. He says, I was there 10 months. He says, the people were great. He says they had their own little society.
It was real life.
Yeah, he says they go in, they worked in their markets and everything. He says, I was up City Hall. I was a heretic. I'm saying you can't do this. And they did it anyway.
Yeah. Of course, because it wasn't anything about slum. It was about
money.
Property values and real, downtown real estate location.
You're supposed to do it in a timely fashion. You're supposed to turn your, he got it in 58, and the projects were supposed to be done by like 68. Instead, he built one in 58, took all the money. Then he built Longfellow Towers there in 72.
Really?
And then where West End Place is now, that was empty till 96 when West End, when the Lowell Square Associates finally put it up, of which we were partners, and we ended up, that's a whole other story. That's a whole other story. And the B.R.A., our partners turned around and said, because we decided to, there's a law, I forgot the law, it's a state law that says anybody, I think it's 41B or something, anybody evicted by eminent domain shall have preference in the rentals of the units. So we went to court to clear it up. Our partners turned around and said, oh, you broke our agreement, we don't have to do anything for you, and they just like threw us totally out. They were supposed to give us a museum and all this, which, by the way, they finally did, just because we put an appeal on fair pay. I don't understand it, but sometimes it works that way. And we went to the B.R.A., and they said, well, that's between you and them. I said, well, you put that in the land disposition agreement. You're supposed to hold their feet to the fire. They said, oh, no, that's between you and them. However you work it. However it works out. Of course, Maloney, who was the rental agent for West End Place.
Oh, really? What a happy coincidence.
Everybody loved us. It's strange. But that's the history of B.R.A. And we have the neighborhood mayor, Menino, right?
I hope that's in quotes.
Yeah. And, he keeps it going around and saying, on the papers, the neighborhood mayor, the fixer.
I know, and the preservation mayor.
Yeah, all this stuff.
This is the second historic theater that he's tearing down for this Kensington.
Yeah, I know that. I couldn't make any of the. Fred McClennan keeps calling me up about it, and when he's
from the Gaiety.
Yeah, the Gaiety, and a lot of those meetings are scheduled at odd times that I can't make. I mean, just like I go to some of these meetings with the Alliance. Okay, yeah, I know you see me pop up every so often, but it only happens when everything falls right. So some of these things you just can't make, and I think the Alliance things were like 2:00 in the afternoon or something. Some of them at City Hall. I forgot. They were just at odd times that I found very difficult to make there, because I would have liked to gotten up there and and said my piece on it, because
on the Gaiety. I mean.
Yeah.
And the Gaiety Theater is a real old-time, glorious theater. I mean, you couldn't replace that right now. The space, I've been in there. I was able to take a tour in the beginning when they let a few people in with the group that became the Friends. So that really should be saved. And the Boston Landmarks Commission, which didn't landmark it, decided not to give it landmark status because it didn't meet their criteria, still said that it should be preserved. The Midtown Cultural Plan says that it should be preserved. It's the Midtown Cultural District.
I want you to take a look at that. That was the Mayu School.
Yeah.
And it had a big turret on this side that ran up.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at this building. It was beautiful.
Oh, I'm very sad.
Beautiful. All this granite,
Yeah.
granite. See, that's all
I
granite.
don't know how
granite.
they brought themselves to
And
tear
they
the
were
city down like that. I don't know how they could do that. I don't know what it takes, what kind of people it takes to stand and watch a wrecking ball take down a city
There was
like
a
that.
place in the West End called Poplar Place. I lived on Poplar Street. It was a little bit down from me. It had this old metal grate, okay, and inside were all these clapboard houses. Now it's strange because you're in the middle of 4 and 5 story tenements all around you, and you come in. It looks like a little piece, with grass and
Suburban Wonderland.
brick sidewalks, right? It looks like this little oasis, in the middle of all the rest of this. And that went too. It dated way back. I mean, they just didn't care. They were supposed to. They were supposed to go there, and they were supposed to look out for all these gems and supposed to keep them, and they didn't.
It was a very predatory time.
Yeah.
It was.
And still is. I mean, I really don't see. They do it different because they don't want to do it.
It's not wholesale like that,
Yeah.
right?
They can't. They can't.
Right. There's still historic stuff falling left and right in the city.
Yeah, and actually, I'm ashamed of this city, because a lot of the things they've done. On the other hand, I know Flynn wasn't perfect. Okay, the Flynn administration wasn't
It was
perfect,
before my time, so I can't
Yeah.
even comment.
but they did a lot of things. I think they were one of the better mayor regimes that try to do the right thing.
We have to have a system that works in the normal range of human capabilities.
That feeds.
So that there's transparency, there's accountability, and within the reasonable range of people that come and go into office and into appointed jobs, it'll work for people. It'll be democratic. We can't have it where it's a banana republic or an enlightened despot, where, if you're lucky, once every 3 generations you get an enlightened one,
That's right.
and all the rest maybe not so, That's what's missing here. We don't have the rule of law. We have the rule of persons. We have individuals who, the mayor here, see, we don't have our checks and balances in Boston. Not only does the city council
I agree,
have
totally.
no role in planning, we're relegated to the sidelines, and now the city councilors go to testify to the B.R.A. The world is upside down here. City councilors go as supplicants to the B.R.A. board and beg, oh, please, another 3 units of affordable housing. In every other city, the city council is sitting at the table,
That's right.
and the redevelopment authority comes and begs. Nobody notices that here.
No,
So the city council has no real role in planning.
that's right.
I mean,
I
except
agree.
for the odd urban renewal modification, and that's very odd, as I said. There's a
right.
half a dozen in decades.
And I didn't realize that they had the authority to put it in front and say what was the
They
modification.
decide
Right.
what they get to see, except in the Park Plaza plan where it's more specified. The B.R.A. is an imperial power of which Boston is the only colony.
That's right. Darth Vader.
They run us from afar.
I agree.
They run the city from afar.
I agree.
And whether they're good, in the good old Steve Coyle days, and I'll tell you there are a lot of people who don't think it was such good old days,
Well,
or in the
yeah.
bad old days or whatever old days, they run the city from afar. They're not accountable. The city council is disengaged. They don't owe you anything. You can write letters, you can
Yeah.
call to the B.R.A., they don't have to answer.
that's right.
They run on those public purpose, public use criteria. I say, how can you take this property? Economic development, it's public use. Well,
Yeah.
and they're just about immune to lawsuit. So much of what
Right.
they do is immune to lawsuit. It's subsumed under all those, recently, formerly unconstitutional and recently, justice-approved powers that we don't have a tripartite government. You can challenge a taking within a certain period. There are provisions for challenging the taking as an error of law, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah, I've never seen it work on this.
And most of the thing is just haggling afterward over the money, but
Yeah.
you're gone by then.
Yeah.
So that's why when you put things into the hands of the B.R.A., you not only lose the legislative branch, you lose the judicial branch. So we've got a very powerful executive here, and if it's Menino or if it's somebody else, that's not the point. I'm not saying we have a bad one, we have a good one. It's a bad system to put all of the power into the executive branch with no legal recourse. It's so difficult to get a balance, checks and balance of powers here. And so the city councilors are are basically powerless on anything important. They could be more powerful than they are, but it's not sort of, it's not a culture of
well,
that.
they have to look out for the patronage. If they don't have the patronage, if the mayor doesn't go down and fix the potholes or put people onto work,
Of course. But threatening the B.R.A., of course, really threatens the mayor's power because that's his private pocket government.
Yeah,
He can get everything done through that, he or she.
That's why Maloney ended up, because you had Maria Lago, and Lago, and Marissa, that's right, Marissa Lago. I should know because we went to the Supreme Court with her name on the.
Yeah, I bet you know.
and she was just a strange woman. Okay, we were supposed to sit down and have a mediation meet with her, right? She walks in, and this is supposed to be mediation. She goes, "I'm here to discuss this. I'm only here to discuss." I forgot what the point was, right? Now we're supposed to be talking about general mediation, right, to see if we can square this out. "I'm only here to discuss this, and if we talk about anything else, I'm out of here."
Really?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it wasn't just us; it was everybody. Okay,
I never saw her in action.
Because she became such a liability, they got rid of her real quick.
And the Globe came out with a few of the about South Station, that there was a conflict of interest, and we need a real planner that's an independent. So he said, "Well, you want a planner? Okay, you pay for her." But she's still going to answer to the B.R.A.
Okay.
She'll sit in the B.R.A. and be a part of that act. And she is. So to this day, she does not answer to the city council.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Because we have about a minute left.
We need to make a real planning department in the city. That's in the line of government, that's on the city budget, that's accountable to the city council. So we have a city council with a job, that is involved in shaping the city and is accountable and gives us a voice in planning. Because right now, we're just crying in the wilderness. They don't have to listen. And we need to terminate the urban renewal plans, which the B.R.A. is now working to extend indefinitely.
Yeah, I know.
And working to circumvent the city council to get that extension by doing it as a state-level legislation. They want to get some other city to file for it so they can just be helpful.
That's right. We'll go along.
We have to help Springfield, Cities that haven't done anything with their urban renewal in 40 years need another chance. So we have to help.
To destroy a neighborhood.
Well, yeah, hopefully, ideally. So that's what we need to do. We need to be like everybody else. We need to make a planning department, and we need to stop urban renewal so we can have a real estate market here, and just real planning and real regulation, and depoliticize it.
Well, I agree with you totally. Well, that was Shirley Kressel. An old show that we did with Shirley, and there are a lot of, basically what she said then is coming true now, especially places like Kensington Place and everything. The B.R.A. has entirely too much power. They keep using it. For a lot of years they didn't, because of the West End was such a horror show. They stopped using it that bad. But now they seem to be coming alive again. Especially, what really irks me is that brief in New London supporting the taking of the homes on in New London. It's really a shame. This shouldn't be happening anywhere in the United States, and especially the B.R.A., who have the most notorious project in the country, the old West End. It was used. The federal government used it as an example of how not to conduct urban renewal, and they're giving briefs to people that's telling them that the urban renewal and eminent domain is okay. It's just absurd. And that being said, I'll see you at the next West End video newsletter.